Io parlo. The words came out perfectly from the mouth of a Brazilian child, just 2 years old, fluent Italian. The family was in complete shock. How could a child from São Paulo who had never been exposed to Italian speak it so perfectly? Sofia had just been born in São Paulo, but she already carried memories of a life that wasn't her own. And what she would reveal in the coming years would leave her family, scientists, and the entire world speechless. When the washerwoman said, "But no one here speaks Italian," little Sofia answered without hesitation, "Io parlo." I speak. That was only the beginning of a mystery that would soon involve World War II Rome in flames, orphan children, deadly bombings, and a tragedy that would echo for decades to haunt a Brazilian family. Engineer Hernani Guimarães Andrade, founder of the Brazilian Institute of Psychobiophysical Research, received a phone call in 1969 that would change everything. "Professor, I know a little girl who speaks Italian and says she lived in Rome during the war." Sofia was no ordinary child. At 2 years old, she already showed an inexplicable terror of airplanes. When she heard the roar of engines in the sky, her little face would contort with fear and she would scream desperately for everyone to close the doors of the house. "Don't let the plane in. Don't let it in." Why was a Brazilian child who had never experienced war so terrified of airplanes? The answer lay in the fragmented memories of a previous life, memories of a little girl named Ariana, who had lived through the horrors of Nazi bombings in Rome. And when Sofia began revealing details of that past life, the scientific world fell silent. Grandmother Elena took out her diary every night to jot down the impossible words that came from Sofia's mouth. How could anyone explain that a 2-year-old could express, in perfect Italian, concepts she didn't even master in Portuguese? Bambola, bambina, amor mio, endearing Italian words that flowed naturally from Sofia's lips, as if it were her native language. When Sofia turned 3, the revelations became even more specific and terrifying. One Sunday afternoon, while playing in the backyard, she stopped suddenly at the sound of a plane. She said something that chilled her grandmother's blood. "Grandma." Back on the Capitoline, the planes dropped bombs this big, and she opened her little arms to show their size. Then there were piles of small metals on the ground, hurting people. How could a 3-year-old Brazilian child know about aerial bombardments, bomb shrapnel, and the horrors of war? Sofia wasn't inventing stories, she was remembering. And there was more. She constantly spoke of a woman named Senhora Alfonsi, who cared for her and other orphan children. "My friend, Senhora Alfonsi, took care of me back on the Capitoline. She had long black hair and was very fond of me. We all slept on the floor." Who was this Senhora Alfonsi? How could Sofia know a woman who seemed to have lived decades earlier in Rome? The most moving moment came when Grandmother Elena asked if Sofia missed her. The little girl lowered her head. Then tears began to roll down her face, a 3-year-old child crying for a woman she supposedly knew in another life. The case took an even more shocking turn when Sofia's mother, Marina, began having extraordinary mediumistic experiences. During a spiritual session, she was taken over by an entity who identified herself as Senhora Alfonsi, and then the most startling phenomenon occurred. Marina, who didn't know a word of Italian, began speaking fluently during the trance. Coincidence, or was Alfonsi truly trying to communicate through Sofia's mother? January 1st, 1967. The family was together in Santos when they received a calendar as a gift, a simple page with beautiful landscapes to decorate the house. Nothing special until Sofia saw one of the images. When the 4-year-old looked at one of the prints, her eyes widened in terror and she began to tremble like a leaf. It was here. This is the Capitoline. This was the house where I lived, and this was the school. I played leapfrog on these stones. The family rushed to read the caption under the photo, Rome, Italy. The image showed the ruins on the Campidoglio, Rome's famous Capitoline Hill. Sofia had instantly recognized a place she had never visited in her current life, but which lived in her deepest memories of a previous existence. It was the confirmation the family needed. Sofia had indeed lived in Rome as a child named Arianna. Sofia's revelations grew even more specific. She described in horrifying detail the bombings she had witnessed. There was a bridge there, and when the sun shone and reflected on the metal, I had to close my eyes. One day a plane dropped a bomb. The bridge collapsed, and there were piles of small metal pieces on the ground. How could a 4-year-old describe so precisely the effects of aerial bombardment during World War II? Sofia had never studied the war, never seen documentaries, never had access to such information. There were other disturbing details. She talked about her little companions at the orphanage, Giulia, Rosetta, Tina, and Chiara, which she pronounced with a perfect Italian accent. Chiara was very disobedient and always ran away. I had to go get her, Sofia said, with the authority of someone who had actually lived through those experiences. But the most shocking story was about Tina. One day, Tina was wounded in the leg, either in a fight or by shrapnel. A doctor treated her, a doctor from the United States. Then Tina was thrown into a hole full of dirt. They threw dirt, and she never came back. Sofia, with the innocence of a 4-year-old, was describing the death and burial of her orphanage companion. In a stunning detail, she knew that American doctors had tried to save Tina, confirming that these events took place during the American occupation of Rome after 1944. Part 2. Sofia's memories painted an increasingly clear and terrifying picture of orphanage life during the war. Rome was under siege. Orphan children survived as best they could, and terror came from the sky in the form of planes laden with death. There was almost no food in the rescue house, she said, using the Italian idea of a salvatore, place of relief, to refer to the orphanage. Most of the time, Gennaro brought only rice. Sometimes there were surprises. American soldiers arrived with special gifts, chewing gum. Sofia spoke with excitement about those rare candies the U.S. soldiers gave to the children, a detail that chilled the family. Shortly before these revelations, a child had choked to death on chewing gum on the very street where Sofia lived in São Paulo. Terrible coincidence, or fate's dark echo? Sofia went on. Back on the Capitoline there were big cracks in the walls from the bombings. The walls split when bombs exploded nearby. How could a Brazilian child know that bombings cause structural cracking in buildings? This was specific knowledge of blast effects, not something one learns while playing. Most impressive of all was the xenoglossia, her ability to speak Italian perfectly. While her mother was doing laundry, adding bleach to the water, Sofia asked, "Is it to make it more lucido?" using the Italian word for bright, clean. How did she know that bleach makes clothes lighter, and why did she express it in Italian? Each day, new Italian words emerged naturally in her speech. Gomma da masticare, chewing gum. Raviolini, when she saw cappelletti being prepared. Bambola, bambina, amor mio. It was as if two personalities coexisted in the same child. Sofia, the Brazilian girl of the 20th century, and Arianna, the Italian orphan who had survived the horrors of World War II. But the worst was yet to come, the most shocking revelation of all, how Arianna died in Rome, Easter Sunday, April 1976. Sofia was playing peacefully in the kitchen while grandmother Elena prepared lunch. Suddenly the roar of an airplane tore through the air, and something stirred in the child's memory. She stopped what she was doing, stared at her grandmother, and spoke words no one would ever forget. "You know, Grandma, when I was there on the Capitoline, a boy came running with a pen in his hand, but it wasn't a pen. It was a bomb that went off." Grandma felt her blood run cold. "And then?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The bomb went off and hurt my cousin, my friend Alfonso Dinari, very badly. And there was a lot of blood." Sofia ran her little hands over her head, showing how the blood had streamed down her face. "And you, dear?" asked her grandmother, already sensing a terrible truth. I hid in the corner, my arms tight against my chest. Sofia's face showed pain, fear, and shock. Those innocent words revealed the terrifying conclusion. Arianna had died in that explosion. The object the boy found in the street was one of thousands of booby-trapped devices the Nazis scattered across Europe to terrorize civilians, bombs disguised as everyday objects, pens, toys, household items ready to explode when an innocent child touched them. The boy took what looked like a fountain pen to Signora Alfonsi, who, upon trying to open it, boom, the blast killed all three instantly: the curious boy, the loving caregiver, and little Ariana. Sofia described being thrown into a corner by the force of the explosion, suggesting her head had struck the wall. There was physical evidence of this tragedy. Grandmother Elena discovered a bony depression on Sofia's skull, exactly as if she had suffered a severe head fracture. Doctors confirmed it was a scar-shaped birthmark, precisely where Ariana's head would have struck when she was hurled by the blast. Science still cannot explain how past life trauma might leave physical marks on a present body, but the Sofia case presented this frightening evidence before everyone's eyes. Engineer Hernani Guimarães Andrade knew he was dealing with something extraordinary. As a rigorous scientific researcher, he needed to examine every detail to separate fact from fantasy. First, he ruled out fraud. Sofia's family was middle-class, honest, hard-working, with nothing to gain by fabricating a story. They requested anonymity and refused interviews with the international press. When an American reporter insisted on speaking to Sofia, the family categorically refused, even with assurances that their names would be changed. If it were a scam, they would have chased fame and money, not run from them. Second, he ruled out genetic memory. Sofia had an Italian great-grandfather born in 1868 who came to Brazil at 31 and never returned to Italy. He died in 1954, long before Sofia was born. But he had never been to Rome, never experienced bombings, never lived the war up close. How could he genetically transmit memories he never had? And if this were genetic inheritance, why did only Sofia manifest xenoglossia? Her two little sisters never spoke a word of Italian, and her grandfather never showed knowledge of the language. The most intriguing hypothesis considered was supertelepathy. Could Sofia have mentally captured the experiences of an Italian child who died decades earlier? But this theory collapsed under scrutiny. For it to work, Sofia would have had to telepathically latch onto Ariana's mind in the past, translate from Portuguese to Italian instantly, process a deceased person's responses, bring those translated responses into the present, and respond appropriately in Italian, all at age 2. Neurologically impossible. The only logical explanation left was the most extraordinary: actual reincarnation. Sofia demonstrated about 30 Italian words used correctly. She had specific knowledge about Rome during the war, a conditioned terror of airplanes, visual recognition of the Capitoline, and even physical marks corresponding to injuries from a previous life. The case gained international attention. Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia, considered the world's foremost authority on reincarnation research, included Sofia's case in his official studies. Fascinated, Stevenson mobilized contacts in Italy. Could they find records of Signora Alfonsi and the other people Sofia had mentioned? The search began in January 1971. Stevenson sent details to his correspondent in Rome, Mr. Jacopo Cumin. The mission seemed simple: find records of an orphanage near the Campidoglio during the American occupation of Rome after June 1944. But Rome in 1944 was chaos. Thousands of orphan children. Documents destroyed by bombing. Makeshift orphanages in ruined buildings. Entire families missing. Finding traces of specific individuals was like searching for a needle in a haystack. In May 1971, they sought help from the Santo André Psychobiophysical Research Center, linked to similar organizations in Italy. In 1972, even RIA Italian radio and television joined the investigation. Dozens of Italian researchers combed archives, parish registries, U.S. military documents, and lists of civilian victims. Yet Alfonsi, Ariana, Gennaro, Tina, Giulia, Rosetta, and Chiara remained ghosts of the past. Did that invalidate the case? Absolutely not. Consider the numbers. Rome had nearly 2 million inhabitants in 1944. The war killed hundreds of thousands. Many orphan children were never registered. Improvised shelters operated in basements, bombed churches, and ruined buildings. The lack of official records doesn't prove these people didn't exist. It confirms the chaotic reality of the time. Crucially, all of Sofia's historical details were accurate. Rome was occupied by the Americans in June 1944. U.S. Soldiers gave chewing gum to children. Nazi booby traps disguised as everyday objects were real. American doctors treated wounded civilians. Ad hoc orphanages operated near the Campidoglio. Bombings caused structural cracks. How could a 3-year-old Brazilian child know such specifics without study? Dr. Stevenson concluded, the inability to locate the people mentioned does not invalidate the case. The evidence is intrinsic and impressive. Part 3. As Sofia grew older, something extraordinary and a little sad occurred. Ariana's memories slowly faded, as if two souls were finally separating. At 4, Sofia began resisting questions about the past. When asked about Rome or Signora Alfonsi, she would reply irritably, I don't want to go back to the Capitoline. I was born here now, and I want only this mother, Marina. She is the mother I want. It was as if Sofia's current personality had taken full control, pushing Ariana's memories into the depths of her subconscious. Grandma, last time I was born there. Now I was born here, and I'm not going back, she declared, choosing her current life. Xenoglossia disappeared completely after age 4. Sofia never uttered another word of Italian, as if a door had closed between the two existences. Some marks, however, remained. At 9, while watching a war film, she became visibly disturbed and left the room. Afterward, she said, I don't like war. I really don't forget. I don't like Germans. How could a Brazilian child of the 1960s hold such strong feelings about Germans and war? Where did those emotions come from? At school, during Soldiers' Week, Sofia wrote an essay that puzzled her teacher. I would not want to be a soldier at all, because I don't like being a soldier. It's horrible. As a girl, I don't like it. Even if I were a boy, I wouldn't want it, because a soldier has to sacrifice himself and fight, and because of war. It's horrible. Almost all soldiers died in war. Those words carried a pain far beyond the experience of a normal child. It was as if Ariana were still whispering through Sofia, I saw what war does. I live that horror. Her fear of flying gradually disappeared. By 14, Sofia flew normally, without anxiety, as though the two souls had made peace. Ariana whispering a final goodbye so Sofia could live her new life fully. The Sofia Ariana case became a sensation in international scientific circles, cited by researchers worldwide as one of the strongest pieces of evidence for reincarnation ever documented. Dr. Ian Stevenson included it in his publications as a classic example of responsive xenoglossia, the ability to respond appropriately in an unknown language, an extremely rare phenomenon, difficult to explain by conventional means. What made the case unique was the convergence of evidence. Responsive xenoglossia, approximately 30 Italian words used correctly in context. Accurate historical knowledge. Details about wartime Rome. Visual recognition. Instant identification of the Campidoglio. Physical marks. Bony depression matching fatal head trauma. Conditioned behavior. Specific fear of airplanes. Emotional memory. Tears at the mention of Signora Alfonsi. Family mediumship. Mother speaking Italian during trance. There was no plausible way Sofia could have learned all this normally. Universities in the United States, Europe, and Japan included the case in parapsychology curricula. It was translated into English, Spanish, German, and Japanese, reaching researchers worldwide. But the deepest impact was philosophical and spiritual. If reincarnation is real, if consciousness survives physical death, then our understanding of human existence must change. Thousands found comfort and hope in Sophia's story. Parents who lost children saw signs that death is not the end. People in despair discovered life's transcendent purpose. The case raised profound questions of cosmic justice. Why did Ariana, an innocent child, suffer the horrors of war? Do we choose our experiences before birth? Is there a greater plan behind seemingly random suffering? Hernani Guimarães Andrade, even in advanced age, continued receiving letters from around the world. Medical students exploring the mind-body connection. Quantum physicists intrigued by consciousness. Therapists working with past life trauma. Sophia's legacy transcended science to touch the human heart, the certainty that we are more than temporary bodies. After all, if a Brazilian child could carry memories of Rome in flames, tears for friends lost decades earlier, and scars from injuries never suffered in this life, then perhaps we truly are eternal beings living temporary experiences. Today, Sophia is a grown woman, married with children, leading a normal life in São Paulo. She rarely speaks of her childhood memories, as if Ariana had finally found peace after decades of separation. But the lessons of her story continue to echo. Death is not the end. It is a transition. Love transcends time and space, like the affection Sophia felt for Senora Alfonsi, a woman who died decades before she was born. Traumas can span lives, but can be healed with understanding and love. Little Ariana, who died in a terrible wartime tragedy, found a second chance through Sophia, a life of love, family protection, and opportunities the war had stolen. Isn't that what we all want? A fresh start. The certainty that our mistakes are not final and our potential is limitless. Dr. Hernani Guimarães Andrade dedicated 40 years to researching cases like this, cataloging more than 70 similar occurrences in Brazil. His rigorous work opened doors to a deeper understanding of human consciousness. Evidence cited: medical documentation of birthmarks, recordings of Italian words, testimonies from dozens of witnesses. International investigation coordinated by Dr. Ian Stevenson. Decades of scientific analysis. Primary sources include Reincarnation in Brazil, 8 cases that suggest rebirth, Hernani Guimarães Andrade. Eau Clarim Publishing. Archives of the Brazilian Institute of Psychobiophysical Research, IBPP. Research by Dr. Ian Stevenson, University of Virginia. Medical documentation and family testimonies collected between 1969 and 1987. This is just one extraordinary story suggesting we are more than we imagine. On the Paths of the Soul channel, you'll find countless similar cases, each grounded in rigorous research and documented evidence. If this story touched your heart, please like the video so more people can discover it. Share it with those you love. Everyone deserves to know that life goes on. Subscribe to Paths of the Soul for more life-changing stories and activate the bell so you don't miss new cases. Have you ever had an inexplicable experience, vivid dreams, unexplainable fears, knowledge you don't know how you learned? Share your story in the comments. You could be the next case we investigate. Because if Sophia can remember Ariana, if a Brazilian child can carry memories of Rome, then you too are eternal. You have a greater purpose. You deserve every chance at happiness. Death is only a pause. Life is eternal. Love never dies. Until the next case on Paths of the Soul.